afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Scott, and I will be hosting today's webinar. Today, we are going to talk about Sage 100 and the order of closing modules in your Sage product. During today's presentation, you will be muted on your line, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So there is a question feature where you can click on and enter your questions. I will address as many of those questions as I can. And anything that cannot be addressed during the session, I'll be glad to take offline and follow up with you after the presentation today. Today's presentation is not going to be a long one, but it is some good information, especially if you are new to Sage or you're new in a position and you're going to be doing period end and year-end processing. So to get started, what I wanted to talk about first is that in preparing for year-end, for any of you that need to process 1099s, W-2 forms, you're doing maybe your first inventory physical count. If you're going to need assistance, you need to get in touch with us so that we can schedule an appointment in advance. Anyone that does 1099s or W-2s should have already received 2 emails from Oasis with a questionnaire that you need to fill out in order to request an appointment. So if you did not receive that questionnaire, maybe it got hung up in your spam or junk mail, something of that nature. If you will email me at pam@oasisky.com and let me know that you need another copy of that questionnaire, I will be glad to forward that to you. So what I want to talk about first is before you just start arbitrarily closing your periods and doing your year end, you need to understand and know how your history settings are set in your Sage 100. So you want to know how long that in your setup screens, you're actually telling it to keep history. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples to show you where this information is kept. And we'll just start with accounts payable as an example. And if we go to any module and go to setup and go to the options, which is the first thing typically listed under setup, and you go into your options, most every module, there's a few exceptions, but almost every module has a history button. And when you're looking at that history button, it will give you different options for how long you want to keep history. So, for instance, in AP, it's asking how long we want to retain vendor history. And the minimum is 2 years. You'll see I can't change that. Or I can go up to 99 years. The same with, I have the number of years to retain my 1099 history. And that, again, can be from 2 to 99 years. When I do either a monthly period end processing or I do my year end processing, Sage is going to come out and look to see how long I want to keep my AP history. And then based on this setting, it's actually going to then purge anything that does not fall into that parameter. So you want to make sure that you're looking and you're keeping information for the proper amount of time. Once you purge that history, there is no way to get that information back. You would have to restore from a backup. So I'll go through a couple of other modules so that you can see this information. But if you want to just kind of double check, maybe you want to run it past your supervisor or you want somebody just to double check you, you can also, when you go into this history tab, you can go to your printer icon and you can actually then preview this or print it, save it to a PDF. But you can go down to the history section And let's see, get over to that area. And it will tell you what your settings are. So here's my history folder options, and it's telling me what I have this set for. So if you want to kind of print that out so you can review it and double check it, you certainly can do that as well. So that's one example in accounts payable. Another example, if we go into accounts receivable, we're going to go down and we're going to go to setup. We're going to go to our AR options. And then we're also going to go to our history tab. And in this area, it's asking me how many years I want to retain my cash receipts history. Again, it's from 2 to 99. It's asking me how long I want to retain my customer history, my salesperson history. So again, I can print this out if I want to, but you just need to make sure that you're good with these numbers and the number of years that you're keeping history before you do the period end. Once you do the period end, if you realize that you've wiped something out, you can't go back in here and just bump up that number and it brings the history back. So I would check every module that you utilize in your Sage and just make sure that you understand how long history is being kept. So I'm going to open it up for just a moment and see if anyone has any questions. If you do, go ahead and just in the Q&A section, go ahead and type in your information, and I will be glad to answer those questions. So that's the first step that you want to do. The next step, when you're getting ready to close a period or do your year end, you want to make sure that all of your transactions are posted. So for instance, in accounts payable, you want to make sure that you know, your AP check register is updated, your invoice registers are updated, and that also flows through to your daily transaction registers. So you want to make sure all of those are updated. So there's a question that says, once you close the period, all history past that transaction date is purged or lost. And the answer to that basically is yes. You know, it assumes that if you've told it you want to keep your check history for 2 years and you do your closing, then it's going to look at anything that's 2 years prior. Now, actually, let me step back just a minute, because if you're new to Sage, or you may not actually, you may go, well, gosh, I never close any periods in my Sage. If you go into a module, we'll go into AR again and go into the options. If you go into each module, it tells you what fiscal year it's in and what the current period is. So let's say that you use a calendar year and you go in and look and your AR has not been closed since May of 2020. Then you're actually going to have to go through and close May. Then you're going to have to do a period in for June, and you're going to have to get all the way up to the 12th period, and then that's when you would do your year end. So before you start doing any period end processing, you do want to check that history. I've had in a couple of cases over the years that someone had accidentally changed some of these numbers to 0. Now, in the newer versions, it doesn't allow that. But if you're still on a much older version of Sage, a lot of the fields ask you how many days you want to retain history, and it will literally let you set it to 0 days. And if you do that and do a period end, it's basically going to then wipe out that history. So I believe that probably answered your question, but if it didn't, then just let me know, and I will be glad to go into that a little further. So kind of going back, we talked about making sure all of your transactions are posted, and that is for every module that you basically use. And you know, some transactions that you make affect multiple modules. So for instance, if you use the purchase order module and you track inventory, when you do an inventory receipt of goods, that is going to impact your purchase order module. It's going to affect your inventory. It's also going to affect your general ledger. And if you're doing a receipt of invoice at the same time, it's going to affect your accounts payable as well. So, you know, you just want to go in, you want to make sure that all of those transactions are posted. There are some rare exceptions to the general ledger, but if you close out the year 2020 in accounts payable, and then you find a stack of invoices from December that should have been expensed in December that you didn't key in and you've already closed, you should not reopen December of 2020 and key those in and then do another period in processing. It's not advisable because of how Sage tracks the history, how it purges history. So you do want to be diligent and make sure that you've caught everything. The general ledger does not have to be closed at the end of the year. And typically, most clients will keep it open until after they've gone through their audit and they've received their correcting entries from their accountant, or they've gone through an audit and there's some changes that need to be made. You can definitely keep the general ledger open, but be aware that, you know, if it's still open, you could have somebody post to 2020 when they actually meant to post to 2021. So you do want to be careful with those posting dates. I'll leave it open for just a second and see if anyone else has any questions about that. So if not, we will move on. So you want to make sure that your transactions are posted. And after they're posted, you want to make sure that you get a good backup of your entire Sage. That way, if you are doing a period in processing and you accidentally close a period or you purge out history that you didn't intend to, you can easily restore and you haven't lost anything. So you do want to make sure that you get a good backup. And at that point, I'm going to show you the list of the order in which to close the modules. Now, I will let you all know that I'll leave this up so that if anyone wants to take a screenshot of this, you're welcome to. You also are welcome to follow up with me after the webinar to send me an email at pam@oasisky.com and request a copy of this document, and I will be glad to send it to you. You can find some information just within your help screen within your own Sage 100, and the document that I'm looking at here, I pulled directly from the Sage portal from their knowledge base. So you should have access to that as well. But I will be more than glad to provide you with a copy of this document. So it goes through, and this is the recommended order of closing for your modules in Sage 100. So again, it starts with, it tells you to do a backup, and then it starts listing the modules. If these are modules that you do not own, then you would just skip right over it and move on onto the next module. I'm going to scroll down for just a little bit, and it does give some examples such as kind of what I talked about a minute ago, that sales order processing can also hit inventory, AR, and GL. So all of, you know, all of those should be processed. Everything in sales order would need to be processed before you close sales order, which is listed here. And then, you know, you have your inventory module listed, you have AR listed, and then you have general ledger, which is listed at the very bottom of the list. And let's see, we have another question. So if the question is, if all other modules are closed but the GL is open, do the transactions still post to the AP and AR? It says if previous periods. If you have closed accounts payable and it thinks that it is the first period in 2021, you can date an invoice December, but the posting date that's going to hit AP is going to be January. And you technically could have it hit the GL in December, but you do not want to do that. You definitely want to make sure whatever period you're posting in is the same period for the module and the general ledger. And the best example of that is if you are posting something to AP in one period and you post that transaction to the GL in a different period, then your general ledger detail is not going to balance. And then you're going to be going out and finding, well, you know, why does my AP account, why does my aging report say one thing, but my general ledger says something different, is because you're not using consistent posting dates. So you do want to be careful with that. Like I said, the GL, reopening it can be forgiving if you're keeping your history long enough. And if you have closed the general ledger and then you get some late postings from your accountants, give our tech support team a call and they will help you reopen and kind of navigate through that to make sure you don't run into any issues. But you should not be posting in two different periods. I hope that answered the question somewhat. Oh, okay, I meant do the transactions post in the previous period. So I think I answered that question, that if your AP is closed and you use an invoice date of December and use a posting date of January, you're going to have an issue there. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or not. If it didn't, we can drill down a little bit deeper after the presentation. But the thing that to remember is you do not have to close the 12th period on December 1st before you can move forward to January, because you may actually still get some AP invoices in the beginning of January that you want expensed in December. So it's not like the payroll module where you have to close that period or that year end to move on to the next quarter. You can have more than one period open in your other modules. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, please let me know. And I'm going to go back to that document again that basically is showing the order of the closing. And if you run into an issue where you start looking at your setup options and you realize that maybe your general ledger hasn't been closed for 5 years, or even, none of the modules are closed. I do run into clients occasionally that are like, well, I never do that. I don't know, I didn't know I was supposed to. When I started, no one told me that I needed to close these periods. Before you arbitrarily start going through and closing them to kind of get caught up, give us a call and we will be glad to, again, to kind of help you navigate through that, because if you just arbitrarily went into the options and changed it from, let's say it was fiscal year 2014 period 9, if you just change that to 2020 period 12, you're changing that option here, but it is doing nothing with the history. It's doing nothing with calculating that history as far as tracking your year-to-date or period-to-date information, especially if you're running comparative reports and things of that nature. So arbitrarily changing it here is not going to make a difference in how your history is stored. Okay. So yes, please, if you will just email me after the presentation, I will be certainly glad to give you a call and we can talk through it. So I'm sorry that that didn't address your question. I'd like to know if anyone else has any additional questions, or because that really is all that is necessary to kind of get through your period end processing or year end. Again, feel free to send me an email to request this order of closing, and I will be glad to provide it to you. Also, after today's session, you will be getting an email probably tomorrow, maybe Friday, and it will include a link to the recording of the webinar so that you can go back and rewatch it if you need to. You can also share that with any other team members. So if you have other folks that you would like to view the recording, you're more than welcome to. All right, let's see. Yes, the question is, should each module be reconciled before it's closed? And the answer to that is most definitely yes. You want to reconcile the module. You want to make sure all of your, well, you'd make sure all of your transactions are posted, then run your reports, reconcile, make sure everything looks good, and then do that closing. So yes, thank you for asking that question. That's a great question. So yes, you should be reconciling first and making sure that everything does balance. So I'm going to leave it open for a couple of more minutes to see if there are any additional questions. So feel free to go ahead and add those questions. And we'll wait just a couple of more minutes. And if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and end the session. And then I'll follow up with anybody that sends me an email. I should be able to follow up with everyone this afternoon. So I don't see any additional questions here. We'll give you just a couple of more minutes and see if anybody else has anything. Okay, not yet. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions. If you think of something after the session, send me an email and I will be glad to get with you. And for the attendee that had the one question that I still wasn't understanding your question and providing the right information, shoot me an email and I will be glad to give you a call this afternoon and help you through that. So thank you everyone for attending. I will tell everyone that we are the final webinars for 2020 in December. We have 2 webinars that are going to be talking about accounts payable and 1099s. That will be focusing on history, making sure your history is correct, what forms you need to order through Atrix, to process through Atrix, how to correct history, and talking about the new 1099 NEC form. And then there will also be 2 sessions on payroll, talking about creating historical companies if those are needed, talking about what W-2 forms you need to order, any year-end updates that will be required, and making sure you know how to schedule an appointment for any year-end assistance. So those will be the remaining ones for the year 2020, and then we will resume our tips and tricks webinars probably in February of 2021, possibly March, but we will be getting information out to everyone. And so I will look one more time. I don't see any more questions. So thank you everyone for attending today. I appreciate your time, and just let me know if there's anything we can assist with. Thank you. Bye-bye.